That's why I wrote this today, because to me, this free agency is going to be absolutely fascinating.
Let's bring Ken into the conversation. FT Senior Insider Ken Rosenthal with us. Ken, what do you think of the Trey Turner injury and really just the fact that the Phillies are playing great ball? Because if you remember, they've had two pretty successful years before this, not World Series winning years, and they've been up and down sometimes in the regular season. This looks like they've been putting it together early on for the first time.
It does, and I love the Phillies. I love pretty much everything about them, and I'm with you, AJ. They do have some defensive questions, but man, they've had those for a couple of years now, and they've done pretty well. What I love about them, and this can be overstated at times, but I do think with this team, and I'm interested to hear everyone's opinions, there is a certain toughness, a certain quality, a certain intangible thing that they have going on that many other teams lack, even some really good teams. And it carries them. It carries them in the postseason. It kind of defines them. It comes from Harper in many ways and Schwarber, but it's really the whole clubhouse. And again, I know in this day and age, we're quantifying everything and we're looking for numbers and projections and all of that. But that team, there is a certain quality to them. I can't put a number on it. I can't actually define it, but it's there and it really makes a difference for them.
You can't put a number or like anything on it. When you go into that clubhouse and you see these guys, what does that look like? Does it look like guys are more engaged? Does it look like individuals going up to what does that look like from your vantage point?
I don't know that I see it in the clubhouse when I go in there every so often, but I will share a story from spring training, and this kind of told me a lot about the Phillies. I might have even mentioned this before. Brian Snitker had said at one point during the spring, man, the bye really hurt us, I think. Don't know if I love the system. He wasn't making excuses, but the way the Phillies interpreted it, he was making excuses. So I walk into their spring training clubhouse, and there were 5 or 6 guys sitting around kind of talking about this, and they were not happy. And they were basically saying, hey, don't discredit us. We beat you. And that was that. And it just, to me, kind of encapsulated what I'm talking about here. Not every team would react that way. And they had their guard up. They were like, hey, don't go there. And that's kind of the way they go about it. Again, it's not an easy thing to define. I know there are analysts out there, maybe even some fans out there, people in the game who will say this stuff, it doesn't matter. It does matter. I've covered this sport for a long time. You guys have been in the game a long time. You know it when you see it. And I see it with that team.
Let's get to the big trade from Friday night, which you covered in depth on Fair Territory, but we have some follow-ups here for you. I'll start with a fan question from Philip right now. He said, Peter Bendix on 428, quote, it's too soon to evaluate the players we acquired. Peter Bendix on May 5th, or whatever day it was before that, I think. When he said the quotes, we are unlikely to make the playoffs. So he says, my question is essentially, what the hell? I'll add to this because I think you mentioned the article that you put out there. I heard Jim Bowden say this too. Does every team not get a phone call or have a conversation to know that a player like this is available this early? Because that would piss me off if I have a team and I didn't get to make my best offer if I want a player.
Okay, these are two different things, and I'll try to answer each of them. The first one, Scott, going back to what you were just mentioning, I don't know that they reached out to every team. When I checked with them, I was told that they canvassed the market going back to the offseason. They knew what Arraez was going to command on the market, and they had a good feel for what was going on. That, to me, is an answer. I don't know that it's a complete answer because, again, if you were going to pick up all of his salary for 2024, which is pretty much what they did, they picked up all but the prorated share of the minimum salary at something like $600,000. If they were going to do that, I would have perhaps waited for starters, and I would have broadcast that to the industry. Hey, guys, we're ready to play ball here. Here's what we're willing to do. Let's get your best offers. They might have felt that because San Diego's interest dated back to last offseason, that this was going to be the best they can do. And maybe they did quite well. We'll have to see over time whether that is the case. But I questioned that as well, Scott. I questioned whether they fully explored the market in a way that might have resulted perhaps in something better, particularly if they had waited. Now, as for Bendix's quotes, We often hear GMs, presidents of baseball operations, giving quotes along the lines of the first one he said. Hey, it's too early, and it's always too early until it's too late and a trade is made. And it's almost like when you hear GMs say at the deadline, we're not shopping this guy, and boom, he's gone. So I don't really take public pronouncements by GMs, presidents of baseball operations, all that seriously. It did bother me when he said we're unlikely to make the playoffs, as true a statement as that is, and it's a true statement. The whole approach that they have taken since the start of last offseason was setting up for this moment. They went into retreat. They didn't try to improve their team. They signed one free agent, Tim Anderson, $5 million. He's had an awful offensive start. They let Soler go. He wanted to come back. They didn't do much else to supplement themselves. And I know they've had some injuries and Sandy was down and all of that. And I know, goodness gracious, they, when you look at the numbers, could be considered lucky last year to make the postseason. My point on my show yesterday, and my point all along is, you can go forward even if you were lucky last year. You can say, okay, here's where we were deficient. Let's fix those areas. Let's kind of try to build on some momentum. They didn't do that. So this trade was the culmination of that retreat, but that retreat, in my view, should not have happened. And I also want to make this point as well. This is coming, in my estimation, from the owner. Peter Bendix was hired to execute this vision. Make us like the Tampa Bay Rays. And as I mentioned in my article the other day, and I believe I mentioned it on the air yesterday, the Tampa Bay Rays since 2008 have had two seasons, in which they won fewer than 80 games. 2 seasons out of all of those years. Why? Because they didn't pull this kind of thing. They have repeatedly just retooled on the fly. It hasn't always worked. They've had some down years, no question. It's going to happen, even to the best teams, the most rich teams. But at the same time, they didn't do this. And that's the problem that I have with the Marlins. And of course, it's not the first time they've gone into this kind of retreat.
Okay, Ken. I'm gonna have to preface this by saying, if you speak ill of Luis Arraez, Scott Braun will fight you next time he sees you. Just much like Kratz got mad when we questioned a little bit of the Phillies defense, and he, wait. Okay, so you just explained the Marlins part. From a Padres side of it, do they think that Luis Arraez is the missing piece to allow them not only to get to the playoffs, which still is not 100% assured, especially now with Musgrove down, or do they think it's the next spot once they're in the playoffs to get them to have a deep run? Because to me, it's kind of like the Dylan Cease trade. Like, were the Padres one pitcher away from making the playoffs at the time? I didn't think so. Were they one singles hitter? And listen, Luis Arraez is a great singles hitter, but he is a singles hitter, basically a DH, away from being able to not only make the playoffs, but make a deep run, because they've gutted their farm system. I mean, obviously, I know there's they haven't given up their best prospects. I get it. But still, it's like, all right, they're making these moves, but is it enough to get them to the next level?
I don't know that. I don't know that they saw Dylan Cease as the final piece or Luis Arraez as the final piece. What they're trying to do is put as competitive a team as possible on the field. Now, I've questioned A.J. Preller over the years about his ability to put a team together, not to collect individual pieces. He's great at doing that. But putting a functional roster together, that has been a challenge, in my opinion, at times for him. But they are trying. And what's interesting here in the background is that A.J. Preller might be trying to save his job. He might feel that he needs to get to the playoffs to save his job. And if that's the case, okay, that kind of informs his decision-making. I'm sure if you had him on here, he would deny that. But the dynamics of that team have changed considerably because of the loss of the owner, Peter Seidler. So I don't know exactly what's driving this. And certainly if you're defending A.J. Preller, you would say he's acting no differently than he did before Peter Seidler passed away. And that is true. A.J. Preller is one of the most aggressive, creative GMs there is. Is this team good enough? I don't know. Is Arraez going to be a transformative piece for them? I don't know any of that. I still question them, yes. But at the same time, it seems to me that he at least is trying. And as for gutting the farm system, yes, he does trade prospects like no one else. At the same time, AJ, and I've been critical of him for many things, this dude keeps coming up with more. and they keep finding players and they keep finding more players to trade. It's kind of a difficult situation in some ways for their scouting and player development, but it's how they roll. And I don't know if a pitcher gets hurt, if Musgrove's thing becomes more serious or Darvish goes down or whatever, that they'll have enough to go get the starting pitcher that they need at the deadline. But my gosh, they traded for Dylan Cease and they traded for Luis Arraez at a time when we thought their farm system was pretty depleted anyway. So I don't rule anything out with Preller.
Yeah, I commend them for making moves because the city is all about the Padres still, even though they've been a disappointment over the last several seasons. And you're right, he's an international whiz with the signings that he makes. Okay, I'm going to take you to what I think is one of the most popular fan questions. And this can be quick for now since it's very early. But you constantly get questions about Mason Miller. Oh, my team's going to get him. My team's going to get him. I think that's auto because it's the A's. But even without having any, say, like specific conversations yet with GMs about him, can you make the case that this would actually be one place the A's wouldn't go? Because they don't care about their fans, but they do care about their fellow owners. And they did say they're going to compete eventually. Mason Miller just started. He's like a year of service time.
I would expect that the A's position will be, we'll listen on anyone. That's every team's position, on every player. And if some team makes them a ridiculous offer for Mason Miller, yes, they will do that. Now, at the same time, you're the Oakland A's. You're going to Sacramento next year. You have indicated that you are going to ramp up before going to Las Vegas and you're going to put a more competitive team on the field. At some point, that process has to start. Now, maybe if you're the A's and Mason Miller was hurt for a good portion of last year and some team makes you a ridiculous offer, the best thing for your organization would be to trade him. I wouldn't say that it should be ruled out by any stretch of the imagination. But if that trade occurs with Team X, my question will be, okay, well, we'd want to see who they got back, of course. But my question would be, all right, when does the ramp up begin? And I am skeptical. I've written this. I've said it here. I am skeptical this ramp up is actually going to take place and they're actually going to try. But this is their position. This is what they sold everybody on going forward. So I am certain we'll hear Mason Miller's name one way or the other, whether it's real or not, before the deadline. But let's just hope he stays healthy because that dude is fun to watch.
Let's hope Sacramento has a cool light show so he can come out with a cool light show. All right, last one. Last one. Can Pete Alonso reset the market for first basemen that has been depleted essentially since 2014, I think you wrote in your article?
I did. And it's a good question because his agent, Scott Boras, represented two of the players who got big deals in that period between 2008 and 14. Teixeira, December 2008, $180 million from the Yankees. Fielder, a few years after that, $214 million from the Tigers. If you remember, that was after Victor Martinez got hurt. During that same time period, you saw Cabrera get $248, Pujols get $240, Votto get $225. And since then, what have we seen? The biggest contracts for first baseman in recent years, $168 for Matt Olson, $162 for Freddie Freeman, $130 for Paul Goldschmidt. Why has this happened? Aging players to some degree at a position that is not valued defensively. So while Olson certainly is not old or wasn't old when he signed that contract and still isn't, he is a first baseman. And on the defensive spectrum, that is not one of the more valuable positions. The argument you can make for Alonso, the separator, is his game-changing power. Dude's never hit less than 37 homers in a season, never missed more than 10 games in a season for that matter, which is a testament to his durability. I understand that, but I would expect that teams, even though he's a bit younger than Freeman and Goldschmidt were when they signed their deals, teams are going to say, he's a first baseman, and we're not going crazy. We're not going 200 plus. We might not even see him above Freddie Freeman because Freddie Freeman is a future Hall of Famer, one of the great players in the game, a better defender, all of that. That's why I wrote this today, because to me, this free agency is going to be absolutely fascinating. One, you have a homegrown player who has more value to the Mets than he does, in my opinion, to any other team, right? He's their guy. And then you have the Boras dynamic. He's going to have all these free agents, including some that he's going to want to leave for the Mets, who can sign multiples. I get it. But his interests are not necessarily going to be in keeping Pete Alonso in New York. His interest, of course, is in getting the most money. Now, maybe he gets it from New York. But again, this is just going to be really interesting to see how badly the Mets want him, to see how badly Alonso wants to stay in New York because he can communicate that through Boris, and just where this all goes with regard to the first base market in recent years.
Hey, Ken, last one before we let you go. There's a rumor out there the White Sox are willing to trade everybody, right? The whole team. Is this a real thing? I mean, Fetty, Flexen, Clevenger, Kopech, Eloy, Tommy Pham. Now, I mean, would they really trade the whole organization? And what would they do? Just call up their whole AA team and say, hey, guys, let's play?
Does it matter? I mean, seriously.
It does.
It kind of matters.
You know where they are. And
I know, but
I anticipate, AJ, that – go ahead.
No, just to say that, like, I don't know if Chris Getz said this or who, where Bob Nightingale got this, but like most teams don't come out and say, hey, we're trading everybody. Like, who's up? We're open for business, and it's only May 7th, right? So like
they'll be willing.
I don't know.
I'm sure they will be willing to listen on everyone. As I just said, all teams are willing to listen at all times. And yes, I'm sure they will be entertaining some things and trading some people. There's no doubt about that. And they should do that, honestly. But at some point, they're going to have to ask the question and answer the question, where are we going with all this? And that's a very good question. If you're a Chicago White Sox fan, I'm sure you would want some of these guys traded for younger players. That's probably the best thing that they could do for their organization. But when does it start to turn? That's always my
2005
teams. Well, that's always my issue with these teams that go backwards. Okay, Miami Marlins, when does it start to turn? Now, the Orioles provided an answer to that question. It came a couple of years after they were all the way at the bottom. But not every team that does this, especially in this age when there have been some things put into the CBA to discourage tanking, for lack of a better term, not so easy to do. So you go backwards, when are you going forwards? Oakland, Miami, Chicago White Sox. Let's hear an answer to that.
There you go. Ken, thank you very much. Appreciate you. We'll talk to you, or we'll see you actually on Fair Territory on Thursday.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Check out Fair Territory live on Thursdays, 12:30 Eastern time with Ken and Alana Rizzo. And also, if you want to check back to Monday's episode of Fair Territory, it's still nice and fresh.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.